Welcome to the School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist, a mental health coach, and a performing arts school principal. And it's these careers and passions combined that have given birth to this podcast. Those working across the creative industries are 3 times more likely to have a mental health problem. And those working in performing arts and entertainment are twice as likely to suffer with depression and up to 15 times more likely to suffer with anxiety. So as you know, on this podcast, I invite incredible creatives that have survived a rock bottom and are now living the most incredible lives. And this is a podcast of hope and how to get out. And I'm really excited today because I have got the joyous Jonathan Goodwin in the house, aka the Daredevil.
How are you?
Really well, really
Good.
well. And thank you so much for coming down today.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
I'm going to give you a little bio. Not that Jonathan needs an introduction, but just in case you've been living under a rock all your life, here's a little bit about Jonathan. So Jonathan Goodwin has been called the closest thing we can boast to a real-life superhero and the world's greatest theatrical stunt performer. The judges of Britain's Got Talent and America's Got Talent described him as the most dangerous act in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Jonathan has been hanged, buried alive, locked in a box while covered in 200,000 bees, attacked by sharks, bitten by rattlesnakes, and hung from his toes from helicopters. Jonathan has performed on every continent except Antarctica and in every US state except Alaska. Wow. Goodwin has played Broadway, London's West End, Sydney Opera House, and Radio City Music Hall. In 2021, Jonathan was involved in an accident while rehearsing a stunt for American TV. The accident left Jonathan with horrendous injuries and resulted in him being permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Now retired from stunt performing, Jonathan has turned his attention to writing, presenting, hypnotherapy, and being a role model, pun intended, he's been in there, for both disabled and able-bodied people alike. Wow, what an intro.
Thank you. Well, you said it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I feel like we've just scratched the surface, really. I always start the podcast the same way.
Yeah.
Arguably the hardest question I kind of get out of the way immediately.
Okay.
And if you feel comfortable, just to kind of describe to the listeners and the viewers what your rock bottom moment was and try and take us to that moment. And then we're going to kind of just pan out from that point, if that's okay.
Sure. So I was performing a stunt for American television. It was a spin-off of America's Got Talent. And a lot of the time doing those shows, and I've done quite a few of them, rather than do what most performers would do, which is, that you go and do your act, I would create content specifically for those shows because a lot of the time they want scale and most performers are not taking cranes around with them when they're doing their gigs. And so I would write and create content specifically for those shows. So I made a stunt which was essentially, it was 3 cranes. I'm hanging from one of them, 30 feet in the air, upside down, in a straitjacket, over an airbag. And from the other 2 cranes, all the tips of the cranes are in the same place. So we created almost like a triangle. And from the other 2 cranes were suspended 2 cars, and they were held back and also needlessly laced with explosives. So the idea was that I would have to escape from the straitjacket and pull a release, drop into the airbag before the cars swung and collided and exploded where I was hanging. And that didn't happen. So the cars swung, collided with me, exploded, and then I fell at that point 30 feet, but not to the airbag because I wasn't over it anymore. I fell headfirst 30 feet to the ground. And so I broke both my legs. I suffered massive 3rd-degree burns. I destroyed one of my kidneys. I injured my liver. I broke ribs, punctured a lung, broke both my shoulders, and suffered a complete spinal injury. And then I got a free ride in a helicopter to a hospital.
Wow. What's the last thing you remember of that?
So the last thing that I remember is just before it went wrong, I knew it was going wrong because I knew that I wasn't falling. And it's an odd thing, if you spent a lifetime doing dangerous things, you get accustomed to it. So at this point in my life, I am completely absent of the emotion of fear. It doesn't affect me at all. I don't get afraid of things. And so if you knew you were about to be hit by a car, you would flinch. There would be an adrenalized response. And my response was that I went, oh, fuck. And that was that. That's the last thing I remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And actually, even the way you're talking about it, you're so calm about how you describe it. I don't get any sense of any post-traumatic stress disorder from it, or any, or even any anxiety about it. That's quite incredible. Are you aware of how incredible that is?
No, because it's me. If that makes sense. Like it's just familiar to me. Like how I feel about things is how I feel about them. But I understand that it's not normal. I get that my response to what happened to me, and also to my life up until that point, I get that the reason that I was good at what I did was because that's how I processed extreme things. It never bothered me particularly.
And to be absolutely fair to you, I mean, before the accident, you were giving keynote speeches and helping people with mental fortitude. I mean, I'm just going to pull something out from your Instagram. I've done a lot of professional stalking here. You were doing some keynote speaking before the accident, quote, trained to cope with the most intense challenges and high pressured situations. Developing mental health and fortitude has never been more important. And, the proof is in the pudding. This has happened to you, and you almost seemed not fazed by it today in this moment. That's incredible. Yeah.
I mean, so what happened was I knew on the ground, because I woke up on the ground. I knew on the ground that I was paralyzed.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was permanent at that point, but I just remember being. My response was, "Oh, okay." It wasn't. I didn't have this sort of flash of loss or a big emotional swell. It just didn't hit me. And I'm not emotional. I just I'm just a very pragmatic person, and I tend to live in the moment. That's really my philosophy, because it's the only moment that we have any control. It's the only moment that we really live. And the moment that you realize that everything that's happened to you up until this point is now just exists in your head, and everything that will happen to you also, the future and your anticipations about what's going to happen in your life, that only exists in your head as well. And the only moment that you actually live is now. And the moment that you get that and really get it, then there isn't really anything that I think a lot of people in the situation that I was in and am in would be very focused on everything that they didn't have anymore. All of the loss that you experience when you lose your mobility. And I can understand that, but at the same time, we can't do anything about it. It's happened, and every day we all experience that. Every moment of the day we experience, loss of time that we can't get back. But we don't all panic or sit around thinking, well, damn it, I should have done this or I should have done that. And in the same way, you as an able-bodied person, there are millions of things that you will never do in your life. You may never go to the Taj Mahal. You may never go to, I don't know, Sydney Opera, wherever. There are many places that you may never go. But you don't wake up in the morning sad about that, because why would you? That's, you concentrate on what you're going to do and what you can do and what is happening to you now. And so from that point of view, I didn't experience a whole lot of change. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Do you think that's a mindset you've always had, or do you think it was your training around, being a stuntman and the daredevil? Do you think it's something that you had prior to that period of your life, or is that like a mindset that you've trained yourself to have? I appreciate that's a difficult question to answer.
No, I mean, I think that both of my parents are quite naturally pragmatic. Okay. So I think I came into the whole situation ahead of the curve from that point of view. Both my parents are police officers.
Okay.
And are just very practical and sensible, and they've been.
And they said, go and do some really dangerous stunts.
Well, no, do you know what they didn't? They were always very supportive of me, but hated it. If you can sort of imagine both of those things at the same time. Like, I was in the finals of Britain's Got Talent, and they didn't come. They didn't want to be there because they didn't want to watch their son do something that was ostensibly really dangerous, which I totally understand. It is a little perverse that, but I think so. I think I got some of my sort of pragmatism there, and then I also think that it's something that you can train. I think that people sit in their comfort zones. That's why they're called comfort zones, but they don't push themselves. And I think a lot of people we're sort of getting quite deep, but I think a lot of people are very institutionalized in that we progress and push ourselves and learn up until the point we leave the formal process of education, and then that's done, and now we are who we are. We've come out the other side, and we just now exist and coast. And that's not my attitude at all. When I was a kid, because my background was magic. That was the very beginning of me, because I was a really shy kid and I was not particularly brave. Ironically, when I was in school, I made my own rules up for the game of rugby, which was to stay as far away from the ball as possible. And
makes sense.
Yeah, and I was really into magic, and I found the address of this quite famous to magicians guy, who was the consultant for all of the Paul Daniels magic shows. Now I probably need to reference who Paul Daniels is, because this is now, we're getting on for a long time ago. But so there was this guy. His name was Ali Bongo, and I had his address, which was very exciting to me. And so I wrote to him, not because I had anything particularly that I wanted to ask him, but because he would hold something that I'd sent him. And he didn't write back to me. He called me, and I was probably 10, and I had essentially an hour-long phone call with this guy, which was incredible from his point of view. I think he was very into sort of fostering up-and-coming people. And there were two things that he said to me in that call, which were incredibly effective for my career, but also are, I think, really great for life in general. And he said to me, you can do a magic trick with anything, right? And so if you want to be a really good magician, you have to know how everything works. And so I'm going to stick a pin in that and come back to it. And he also said to me, if anybody ever asks you, can you do something, say yes, and then worry about it, right? And so, aside from the sort of the my world and the stuff that I was doing, if you look at those two pieces of advice, saying yes to opportunities, like putting your foot out the door and making a commitment, that's the hardest part of any journey that you're going to go on, right? Is just beginning it saying yes. And it's actually really simple because it's just a word. But saying yes to opportunities will take you around the world. And the knowledge required, that learn everything that you possibly can, that's going to keep you safe when you get wherever you're going. And so it's like the sword and the shield of basically nailing this world that we're in, giving you that security. Because ultimately, and I talk a lot about sort of overcoming fear, because that was sort of my stock in trade, but it's all about the unknown. It's all about that's what we're afraid of. It's fear itself that's the thing, that's the sort of the inhibitor. Because I can tell you, I've hung from my teeth from a burning rope 75 feet in the air. Like, I've done a lot of things that most people would never, ever, ever dream of. And I can tell you for a fact that every single one of them was not as scary as I imagined they were going to be. We build these things up in our minds, and it's never that bad, And what I would do is I would learn as much as I could about each thing that I was going to deal with, so that by the time that I kind of got there, it wasn't as scary.
And it really sounds that sort of really strong blueprint mindset that you had pre to the accident has really put you in good stead to be where you are now. I mean, I don't know if it's coming across on camera. I'm sure it is, all those listening, but there's a real calmness to you. When you were talking about living in the moment, I really sensed that when you were saying it. And sometimes people spout these things and they're sort of running around like a headless chicken. But I really feel that you are authentically, talking about things that are real for you.
Sure.
And that's incredible. Just going back, to your kind of early recovery after the accident. There was a little bit of space. I told you I professionally stalked you
it's fine.
on Instagram.
I'm not freaked out at all.
But there was quite a story to it. If you sort of go back over your digital footprint, I mean, obviously at the beginning, of your Instagram, there's lots of all the incredible things you're doing, the tours and all of that. But quite early on, actually, there's a leaning towards wellness and a real care for mental health. And then after the accident, it exploded and for good reason. Your first post after the accident, you wrote, there was a picture of you in hospital. You wrote underneath it, "To death I say, na 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 boo boo. Love is all you need." Could I probe you on that?
I have to go back 2 months prior to my accident. So 2 months prior to my accident, I started dating. I had been friends with the actress Amanda Abington for probably 10 years on social media, and we'd kind of had just a sort of a normal sort of every now and again sort of touch base, very, very light conversation on social media. And then one day it became just a bit more than that. We chatted more than we normally did, and it was maybe a tiny bit flirty. I mean, I'd been sort of trying to be a bit flirty prior to this conversation, and I was clearly always friend zoned, because now I know that Amanda thought that I was, I had been married before she thought I was still married, but she realized I was single, and so we traded phone numbers, and we arranged to have a call. That first call was 7 hours. I was living in Vegas at the time, and she was here. And so we spoke for 7 hours, and then we arranged to talk again the following day. And that phone call was about the same amount of time. We essentially spoke between 5 and 7 hours every day for the whole month of August 2021. And at the end of that month, Amanda was filming a thing for Netflix in Vienna, and I flew to Vienna and met her. And so that was the first time that we'd actually physically met, and we were engaged in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Now, clear that I planned it. I knew that I was going to do that, and we had sort of spoken about it. She just certainly didn't think was serious, but we had spoken about it a little bit. But I was in in that cab from the airport to the hotel where she was staying. I was in a very curious situation of knowing that I was about to meet the person that I would spend the rest of my life with, which is a very odd thing. We had an amazing weekend, and then I flew back to America, and 2 weeks later I flew to London to meet her parents, and she met my parents. And then I think we had another weekend. 2 weeks later, we had another weekend in Vienna because she was back there filming. And then I flew back and had my accident. So the amount of time that we spent together prior to my accident was about a week, all told. And that was the thing, that I woke up in the hospital bed, and I know that this condition is permanent, and this is such a new relationship. The greatest sense of loss that I felt was that I would lose her as well, and I had to give her a get out of jail free card. I had to be like, hey, you don't need this is not what you signed up for. So there's no hard feelings, and she just told me not to be so stupid. And that was that. And so there was a level of just, that also made me feel like I hadn't lost anything. That all of the things that were most important to me were still there, right in front of me. There was no big sense of loss from that point of view, and it was just that my relationship with her is incredible. We're just proper soulmates. Like we just have so much fun all the time, and.
You can really see that as well from my professional stalking, which is such a big part of your recovery.
Totally.
And how much joy that you bring each other as well.
Yeah, and do you know what? I don't know how I would have dealt with my situation if I didn't have Amanda.
Sure.
I don't know what that would have been. I'm not a person that, like I said to you before, there's no point. I don't really waste a lot of time thinking about what ifs or the past. I can't wrap my head around what that life would have been, because it would, it's funny because I've always been very, very cynical and a bit of a sort of skeptic about sort of, the powers of the universe and stuff like that. But it really does feel like it was meant to happen how it happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Just in terms of your kind of early recoveries, sort of the month, I guess, the first month after the accident, maybe the first 2 or 3, you've got the kind of classic 4 stages of grief, and I think there's 4 stages of trauma. And I might be forgiven for just sort of thinking that you sort of came round, saw Amanda, and then you kind of just got on with it. Because that you're such a strong character, I could almost imagine you doing that. But was that really what it was like? Were there any stages of grief or coming out of trauma that you're aware of?
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't. There were. I was just very, very used to dealing with physical challenges, and so it was like somebody handed me the keys to a car I already knew how to drive. It was not. I did not have a bad day. I haven't really had a bad day since my accident. There have been moments. I'm not a robot, but those things. Do you know what? And it's funny. I was having this conversation with a guy who works in spinal research at the minute, and the things that they're trying to do. They're doing amazing things right now in the development of spinal research in order to resolve the issue.
Wow.
And one of the most important things, and this is like little stuff, but it's the stuff that was most impactful to me, is not actually the inability to stand and walk or whatever. The biggest thing are specific moments of the loss of sensation of touch.
Right.
Like, you know what it feels like to take your shoes and socks off and step onto a sandy beach for the first time. Like, the idea that loss was impactful to me, actually. And Amanda was working after I got out of hospital, Amanda was working in Chichester, and we went to stay, and the house that we were staying at was right by the beach, and she wanted to go onto the beach and go paddle and swim and whatnot. And I'm totally an ocean guy. I love the beach and swimming and scuba diving and all that. That's my world.
And being underneath cars at ridiculous speeds. I've seen the video footage.
That too.
Don't forget that.
But the beach is the least accessible place pretty much that you can go. Like, there's a big red mark right through it. And I wasn't going to say, well, no, you can't do that now. So I had to sit and watch, and I had a good cry that day. That was hard, but it's only a moment. And I will say that the next time that I went to a beach, I was in a wheelchair that I'd found that was specially adapted to go on to the beach and into the ocean. And the first time that I went to the ocean after my accident, I went scuba diving.
Wow.
Okay. So that's how my mind works. Is like, okay, this specific thing that I'm experiencing right now sucks. I can't go on. So how do I solve that problem? How do I, what's the solution to that? Because there will be someone, I'm not the first person to experience this, so somebody will have solved this problem. And if not, then damn it, I'll solve it. How are we going to do this?
I think one of the reasons, sorry to interrupt you, that I'm so astounded by this mindset, and it's something that I definitely try and, utilize in my own life as well.
Sure.
But particularly the work I do, particularly in rehabs, working with people with addiction issues, is that the tendency so easily over nothing to go into self-pity is huge with say something like addiction. And the way you're talking about it, it's like the brain just, like you say, you have a moment, you'll have a cry, you'll feel what you need to feel, but then you won't stay there, you won't get stuck. That's when gratitude or something else will come in.
Yeah.
Is that like a default setting, or is that something that you consciously do?
No, it's a default setting.
Right. Okay.
I am naturally glass half full, and actually, let's face it. If you want to get pedantic about it, the glass is always full because there's air in it. So there's I'm always.
That's how
like
you do that trick.
I think that I also feel incredibly lucky. Like that it's. You can look at a circumstance and go, well, look, this guy had these horrendous things happen to him. And, through no fault of his own, this happened. And he's had all of these injuries. And he is paralyzed for the rest of his life. And, and that's terribly unfortunate. He's incredibly unlucky. Or you can go, look, this guy had all of this terrible stuff happen to him, and he survived. I should have died. I fell 30 feet head first to the ground, and I didn't hit my head. I didn't have a head injury at all.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And so I feel every single day just incredibly fortunate, because really I shouldn't be here. And so I have the opportunity to now have a completely different life. And I really feels like that. Like, you could persuade me that I died and this is now a different universe, because my life is entirely different. 100%.
It sounds like you see it as a new challenge,
Totally.
And that's something that's exciting. I was watching a documentary on disability a couple of weeks ago, and there was a few people there interviewing, and it really struck me. And they said if they could go back to the way their lives were, pre the disability, that they actually wouldn't want to go back. And I thought, wow, is that something that you can understand?
Yeah, but here's the thing: is that it's funny. I was having this conversation the other day as well. That one of the things that I think people do when they have something like this happen to them is they lean into it, right? They make it part, and it's brilliant. It's a fantastic coping mechanism. You lean into what's happened to you. You make it part of your identity. You become proud of where you are and who you are, and that is an amazing situation where it's an amazing mechanism for dealing with trauma, and so. To that end, if you've put on all of that armor of and connection to this situation, I can understand why it would feel then counterintuitive to take it off in order to go back to this thing that is not who you are now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does
like
make
you've
sense.
put on all of this protection of making it part of your identity. And so I think that's what that is. But, and obviously I don't want to speak for other people, but my sensibility of it, because there's never been a better time to be a spinal patient. There's never been a better time to have the kind of injury that I have. They are making massive leaps and bounds in finding different resolutions to this issue, and everybody's is different. And spinal injury is like a fingerprint. Everybody's is their own version of it.
Okay.
But I've always said, if somebody said to me, "Oh, you'll walk again," or you have to try. Maybe there's a thing. My response to that is, okay, well, great. If that's going to happen. Love it, great, I'm all over it. But if it doesn't happen, it's fine as well. So I would never close that off and go, I want to go back to, here's somebody that's going to wave a magic wand and take me back to where I was physically. Amazing. But I'm also okay how I am. I can kind of juggle both of those things, but I understand it, and it isn't, for me, it isn't a massive deal.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jonathan.
That's all right.
That's and I know acceptance is something that you use almost as a bit of a superpower. I'll come on to that because it's something that you talk about, and I think that's tied up into what you were talking about there. Hope you don't mind me going through a few more of your
it's
Instagram
totally cool.
posts,
It's interesting
because it's stuff that just jumps out of me because it's either stuff that I can either really relate to, or it might be something that I completely agree with, or something I'm aspiring to do myself. I love your notes from the chair.
Yeah.
So if anyone isn't following Jonathan, make sure you go and do that. Go and check out his notes from the chair. I love this. You wrote, "Your job is to seek out beauty and, if possible, create it." And then someone actually wrote in the comments, "How do you stay positive?" And you replied, "Live in the moment." And I know we've kind of touched on live on the moment, but possibly create beauty. What does that mean to you, to create beauty?
Well, I think that one of the things that I think that I mean by living in the moment is to become aware of the beauty that is around us, because I think that most people ignore it or let it pass them by, and I look at the world very differently now, and that has fundamentally has to do with nearly dying is an incredible therapy. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's an incredible therapy for making you just stop every moment of the day and look at it in a way that you are like, well, shit, I'm really lucky to be here. Isn't this view brilliant? Isn't that piece of art or craftsmanship or whatever it might be amazing? Because there is so much that is really mind-blowingly beautiful around us, and I think a lot of people take it for granted. they focus on minutiae of things that, in the grand scheme of things, are not important. And so, that's the first part of that, is just to take a moment to appreciate the beauty that is around us. And I think that actually that can help you to be in the moment. Like, learn the names of plants or trees or birds.
I do need to do
that. If you can look at your environment and know it, and know, oh gosh, that thing is gorgeous, or that bird is is pretty. Listen to that sound. I think that helps you to be in the moment, to be able to really appreciate the beauty that's around you, and then at the same time add to it. Like, that's really why we're here, is to create, and because that's all we can do, isn't it? Is to put ourselves into the environment that we exist in. And who wants to put ugliness into the world?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the one thread through all the episodes so far. All the rock bottoms have been very different. Yours being quite unique, actually, but a similar thing, that because of that rock bottom, obviously, thankfully, and thank God you didn't die. And there's other guests that I've had that could have died as well. But actually, it was the greatest teacher. They've come out of it, all of them, and said they're able to appreciate the small things in life and live in the moment much more. It
is an amazing therapy. It's just one that unfortunately it's hard for people to appreciate without going there. And that's, and I could talk about the reasons for that with regards to, now obviously, I'm a hypnotherapist, and it is, that appreciation of our environment, and just the pace of life is something that has to be an unconscious learning, not a conscious one. And so I can tell you, by the way, you need to, look at trees more, or, whatever it might be. And your conscious mind goes, okay, fine, yeah, great, understand that. I understand that, but you haven't learned it. It has to be something that affects your unconscious mind, and that's not something that I can do by just talking to you. That's the thing. You have to experience it.
Yeah, absolutely. This one might be a bit left field, what I'm about to ask you here, but you strike me as someone that likes a left field question. You wrote on one of your posts, pain is just your body's way of telling you that you're alive. I think on that post you were referring to physical pain. I just wondered if you thought that also applied to mental pain.
Yeah.
Would it apply in the same way?
Yeah, I do. I'll give you an example. Both Amanda and I find it very difficult to be apart. In more than a day, we find it really difficult. And then we've done it, but it's a real challenge. And it takes, it sounds silly, because obviously that's, I understand in the mechanics of or the logistics of human life, that's a normal thing to to have to go and do something, or be away, or whatever. But we are in a relationship where we care about each other so much that it takes an emotional toll. It's a very difficult thing to do, and yet that is it couldn't be more of a profound sort of yardstick of how much we care about each other. Like, it would be awful if I didn't feel that, if that didn't happen. It just, and so although it's horrendous, it's also comforting in a way. And so I think, again, like I said, you can look at something in a very negative light, or you can look at what it actually means, and frame it for yourself like that. I think happiness is a choice. It's something that you choose to be.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we have a lot more agency over our mental health than a lot of people realize. I mean, I appreciate clinical depression is slightly different. Sometimes people don't have access to those parts of the brain at certain moments. Doesn't mean it's permanent, but absolutely. The older I get, the more I work in this space. I absolutely agree with you. And there would have been a time I would have probably want to throw something at you for saying that, but I completely agree. You know, the power of choice is a wonderful thing to learn. That these are tools that you can learn. I absolutely agree with that. I love something else you wrote. I knew acceptance was on here. Accept your reality. If and when bad things happen, reliving what you might have done is a waste of energy. Well, that does what it says on the tin, doesn't it?
Certainly. What are you going to benefit from going back and saying, well, you know, damn it, I should have done this, or what if that had happened, and what would my life be like? It isn't, and so it, you know, there is no. I mean, I think that the only benefit that you get from going backwards is that if you're going to do the same thing again, if you're going to relive and actually relive, if in the future you know something went wrong and you're going to try it again, then going back and going, well, you know, damn, I'm not going to do that in the same way. I'm going to learn from that thing, and I think that's important, because I think if you're trying to do something in your life and you succeed without failing first, then you just got lucky. You know, if you fail a couple of times along the way, then you learned how to get there, and you can repeat it. You know, you can. It's something that you have an innate knowledge of, and so I think from that point of view, looking back and going, okay, well that didn't work, but you know this. But from the point of view of I think of our personal lives, I don't think there's much. I don't think there's much use in looking back.
And that mindset must have really helped you in your career, and continues to help you in your career, because you know you have a brilliant career. You've done some incredible things. I only scratched the surface in the intro, but you know, people listening to this and watching this, they won't know that. But we were at drama school together.
Yeah.
You were the year below me. I'm showing my age now. You know, we didn't know each other that well.
No.
During that time, but everyone always spoke about this really talented magician, Jonathan, and he's doing a magic show somewhere. You know, there was always a sort of buzz about what you were up to. And, you know, you've had this great career. It sounds like that mindset must have really, really helped you, because I said at the beginning, the stats around creatives, that they're 3 times more likely to have a mental health problem. Anxiety is through the roof. Depression is through the roof. You know, you've got that kind of stereotypical actor, I guess, who goes to the audition. They walk out of the room, they lay in bed, and they just ruminate over what happened in the audition, beat themselves up, their self-esteem goes through the floor. That's the kind of stereotype, which unfortunately isn't one. It sounds like you didn't approach the industry in that way.
No, I never auditioned, ever.
Right.
My philosophy is that why be institutionalized? Why approach a problem in the same way that everybody else does?
Right.
Because the whole job is to stand out. The whole job is to be a person that you know people are going to take notice of. And so if you're standing in a crowd of people doing the same stuff, then you're not helping yourself. And so I would create my own opportunities. I would make friends with people that had the ability to make things happen, and I would pitch them ideas. And I was always very lucky. You know, the reason that I got into doing what I did really was not because I had this. You know, I'm not really an adrenaline junkie. I don't have this. I don't wake up in the morning and think, "Oh, I really want to set myself on fire today." It was that I'm a creative, and I love creating, and it doesn't really matter what it is. And I was in a situation where the production company that I was working for made an escape artist special, and it wasn't very good. And so I was a coggy 22-year-old, and I emailed the executive producer, and I told him that I thought his show was shit. But I didn't just say that. I said, surely it should have been this. And I gave him my pitch. And he said, show me, put your money where your mouth is.
Wow.
So
Incredible.
I filmed something, and then all of a sudden I was an escape artist. So it was, I got into it because I sort of hated it, because it was always, it was such a cliche, the escape artists always escaped just in the nick of time. The jeopardy was always death, and they always used props that were, that you've never seen, that made no, that had no connection to normal people. And so it was literally just, well, let's reverse all of those things.
Yeah.
We'll do it for real. Let's make the jeopardy not death. We'll do, failure is valid theatrically.
I think turn it up a notch was one of your favourite sayings.
Yeah.
I've heard you say that a few times. We're going to turn it up another notch.
And let's make it feel real. And so that was the thing. So I basically I carved myself a niche no one else wanted, and I got myself into a world where I'm creating these ideas, and then it was me that had to do them. But for me, the thing that was great was that got me out of bed was creating that stuff, and so I think that I was lucky to have that as the beginning, because then, when you're having a conversation with somebody who can make something happen, if you've got a good idea, then that's going to trump a lot of stuff. Does that make sense?
It does.
That you're not just, begging for a gig, but you're taking them an opportunity. And that was the shift that I made. And I never auditioned for anything. And I'd made a lot of television shows and worked on a lot of different things, but I never took that path.
Well, I mean, I think it's a much better mindset to have. And I know there's a lot of successful performers that have that kind of negative imposter syndrome, anxious-ridden head, and still continue to do well. It must be quite painful still. But then you've got others, like Bryan Cranston. He's quite famous saying,
Sure.
It's not an audition. It's you're going there to show them your work.
Yeah.
You're not auditioning. The audition is the job. You're just showing them an opportunity. Similar kind of mindset. That's brilliant. You said this earlier, but I want to just come back to it briefly.
Sure.
On another one of your posts, you put, stay in the moment, past future only exists in your heads. I just wondered what kind of things you do to stay in the moment. Is there any particular kind of mindfulness practice that you have?
I sort of exist in there as much as I can. I have two modes where I'm either where I am right now, sitting here with you, or wherever now is. I'm either there, or I'm in what I call the office, which is, that doesn't exist in a geographical location. That's just in my head from a point of view of like creating and problem solving and working like that. So and that isn't necessarily being in the moment. That's it's an odd thing. I find it hard to sort of characterize exactly what that is, because that's not working over things in the past, and it's not worrying about the future. That's a space that exists for me where I can just go and make shit up, essentially. And I have that was the university of magic for me was very useful, because it created two skills. If there are some magicians that will just get a trick from a shop and work out their presentation, and they'll do that thing. And I never did that. I always created my own stuff. And so if you're going to do that, then you have to think about what's the thing that you want to present, what's the idea that you want to come up with. But then on top of that, once you've come up with that idea, the impossible thing that you want to present, now you got to work out how does that work? Because obviously magic's not real. So we have to come up with, sorry to burst your bubble.
Yeah,
we have to come up with a method. What's that? And so that's sort of two very different kinds of creativity that kind of come together. And
sounds quite pragmatic, the way you're describing it, rather than a sort of chaotic creative mess. It sounds like you're being quite methodical. Or have I
No, I think that's I mean, I think that's it.
Yeah.
You know, because it has to work in that order as well. You have to go, okay, magicians call it the effect. What's the effect? What's the narrative arc of what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
As in from the point of view of what's the audience going to see. And then once you've got that, then you unpick it a little bit and open it back up again to work out how that can be achieved. And there are some, because sometimes magicians will do it the other way around, and then it's always obvious. There's a great story about the guy who invented sawing a woman in half. His name was P.T. Selbit. He's British, and so that was his trick. But he also invented a less well-known trick, which was called the mighty cheese.
No, I've not heard of that one.
And the mighty cheese was
a
giant wheel of cheese, like a big Edam, and he would invite the strongest men in the audience to come on stage and try and push the cheese over. And not only would they fail to push the cheese over, the cheese would push them over.
Right, okay.
The mighty cheese.
Right,
and what it actually was that gyroscopics were a new thing. I mean, they'd been around for a while, but they'd become sort of, more accessible. So Selbit had come across one of these things, and a gyroscope, and he's like, that's bloody great. How can I make that a trick? And so he's like, I know, I can put plastic over it and say that it's cheese, and then that's the trick, right? And so what you end up with, because it's backwards, is something that makes no sense to anybody, and it's a trick, but you're a mental person. What's a mighty so that's part that's part of that process of creating that stuff. But that world is something that I inhabited for a very long time, and I wrote material not just for me but for lots of other performers as well, because that's my thing, is just coming up with ideas and then making them real.
And is that how you continue to use your time? I know time is something that's very important to you. I think you've described it online, at least, as your most precious commodity, because it's the one thing that you can never get back. I think you said, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, you can't get it back. So are you very pragmatic and structured about your time? I sort of imagine you getting up in the morning and having quite a set routine. Have I got that completely wrong?
Yes.
Right.
I don't have a set anything.
Okay.
I'm very not unhappy, but I get frustrated if I don't make use of the day. Certainly, if I don't progress in whatever it is that I'm doing, then that I find frustrating. I don't do particularly well with stagnation unless it's planned stagnation. Like if I'm going on holiday, I can switch off and that's fine. But if I'm I work from home, and if I'm at home and I'm not doing something, then that I find frustrating.
Right. You don't strike me as someone that suffers with doom scrolling. Are you aware of this phrase? It's when you're just kind of mindlessly on TikTok or Instagram or something, and you're just like basically addicted to your phone. You strike me as someone who's quite boundaried. Like, I'm on social media, I'm now going to turn my phone off and do this next thing. Or have I got that wrong?
No, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that those, you know, as you said, that you know, time is the most valuable commodity that we all have. You know, it's not that's not just me. It's everybody. It is the one thing that you can't get back, and those things, those apps, are literally designed to waste your time. And so we should all be angry about them, actually. You know,
well, they use same techniques as, you know, like gambling and casinos and slot machines, and, you know, the way they all light up. And
that's the thing is that you know, if ever you're engaged in an activity like that and it's entirely free, you're the product, and that's literally what it is. They're selling your eyeballs to advertisers. And the longer that they can keep you engaged in staring at a wall, which is essentially what it is, the richer they get. We should all be angry about it,
and all making free content, of course. They're
designed to they're designed to make you know, to make other people rich, and but in doing so waste our time. And so I do, you know, and it's not like I don't use those things, and there are things there that are entertaining, or you can learn things or whatnot. So it's obviously it's not binary, but I think that there are far better ways. That one of the things that is happening because of the way that we now interact with one another through those devices is that they are training us to lose empathy. If you know, if we have an argument right now, and I say something that is barbed and it upsets you, I will see that I've upset you, because I'm, you know, we are animals that have evolved to work in a tribal way, and that, you know, that's one of the ways that we communicate is by looking into each other's eyes and reading body language, and it's a very nuanced thing. And what we've done is we've eliminated a massive chunk of that. And so if we had that same argument, but we're texting one another or using a chat or whatever, I get to see what you say back to me, but I don't get to see how what I said affected you. And so, you know, if in the room, I might, you know, take it down a notch. I might not say that extra horrible thing or whatever it might be. I might de-escalate that conversation, whereas I don't get to see any of that stuff if we're texting. So I'll escalate, and that's what's happening. Is everybody's getting angrier and angrier because we're losing our empathy. It's training us to lose our empathy, and I think that's a really big problem, actually.
And it's something you touched on, actually. It's one of the posts that you made fairly recently. There was an incident in the gym, I don't know if you remember it, and you nearly got angry with this person, and you took a moment to go, actually, I don't know what this person is going through. I don't. So, you know, it's something that you highlighted. And it's something that I was like, yeah, I absolutely am on board with that. And it's something that I bang on a lot about when I'm working with people. You know, the old me probably back in the day, you know, if I went into Tesco and I turned around to the cashier and said, you know, you have a great afternoon, my expectation would be, well, you have a great afternoon too. But if I got, you know, an eye roll or something else, the old me would actually get offended by that. I'd be like, how dare they be rude? Whereas my default setting now is, I hope they're all right. Because we know when people are happy, they go, all right, back. How you doing? Back. They smile back. They look you in the eye back. But in the past, if I've had a bad day, it's unlikely I would have done that. I'd like to think now I still would. But yeah, there could be one reason. She might dislike me for some reason. Who knows? Maybe I had an Arsenal top on and she was Spurs or something like that.
Sure.
But there's infinite reasons why that person could be behaving that way. It could be that she's had a miscarriage. It could be someone's passed away. She could be ill. My ego will tell me it's personal, that it's something I've done. And like you highlighted, you know, in that Instagram post, which I really like, you know, we don't know what people are going through. And that is empathy, isn't it? I guess right there. Just
Yeah, I think and don't get me wrong, there are dickheads in the world as well.
Oh yeah, sure.
There are plenty, but then it goes back to what we were saying about putting beauty into the world. It's like where is the benefit of the negative emotion? What to you? Because all you're going to do is get wound up, and certainly to them, because they're going to be offended, or if you say something to them, then it's only going to escalate. And I firmly, I don't really lose my temper. I have lost my temper maybe 3 or 4 times in my adult life.
Okay,
it doesn't happen to me.
Okay.
But that's also because it takes a lot to really make me angry, but also when I get angry, it's for a really good reason.
Okay.
I don't.
You save them up for the good ones.
Yeah, I don't give that shit out all the time. It's not like a constant thing, and so I think it's true. You don't know what somebody's going through, and yes, they might have been rude to you, but I mean, is it really a big deal? Honestly, truly. I think that just put more beauty out into the world in the form of kindness. Kindness is really the thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Something else you said, which is a technique that I use quite a lot with people, with clients, and you were talking about not referring to something in the first person. So you were talking about if you're feeling anxious or depressed in one post. I don't know if you remember this one, but you were saying just swapping "I'm anxious" or "I'm depressed" to "I'm suffering from." So not defining yourself by that thing. That's something that I do a lot of work on around addiction, separating it. So often what I'll do with a client is say, okay, well, recognize alcoholism is there, but give it a nickname. Call it something else. So they might turn around and go, the liar wants a drink today. Or, it's a similar thing, I think, that you're talking about.
Yeah, dissociation. If you wear your condition as a name badge, then it's really hard to get it off. If you have a thought that's muddling around in your head, and that really truly about anything. If you have a thought that you sort of something that you're pondering, the moment that it comes out of you, the moment that you speak it, whether you say it or write it down, it becomes your truth. Right now, it is the thing that you think, and and especially if you're saying it to somebody, it really solidifies. And so the moment that you say, I am this thing, it becomes your reality. It becomes your truth. And and so then to unpick that becomes much more difficult. Whereas if you say, I sometimes have this thing, or I suffer from this thing, then it's easier to break that down, because it isn't who you are, who you feel you are, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. I mean, in a setting like a rehab, it's quite stark, because I'll turn around to a client and say, well, if that is exactly who you were, you wouldn't be in this rehab now. You'd just leave and you'd be in the pub having a drink. So there might be a little voice in your head that's saying that you want to do that, but look, you're still in the chair. So, I see it in real time, how that works. And I think it's such a great thing to talk about. Before we get on to all this amazing hypnosis work that you do, and hopefully I can give you a good plug for everyone to go check you out as well, because I think it's brilliant. The last and I promised the last little stalky Instagram post, but I thought it was just really useful, and for those that have missed it, I think it could help a lot of people. You talked about when you broke the car boot and you didn't ask for help, and you tried to do it yourself, and I think you ended up breaking it.
Yeah.
And it was great that you were kind of sort of saying, I think, finding humility to ask for help is a really powerful thing to do. Yeah.
It's something that I struggle with.
Same.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I've always been a person who was incredibly capable. I've done, all manner of different ridiculous things, and I'm not talking about stunts. Like, I once lifted an entire upright piano into a van by myself.
Oh wow!
Purely because I was too stubborn to ask somebody to come and help me.
My dad does piano removals. Well,
really?
He used to, so
Okay.
I know how hard that is.
Yeah, I mean, they're really heavy.
They're really heavy.
And so, yeah, that was a lesson for me, because I did it, but I broke it. And what, I've learned some things from my disability, and one of those is patience, because everything takes 10 times longer. Just does. There's no two ways about it. And then also it's being okay with asking for help. Not being able to reach something in a supermarket happens to me almost every day. And, it would be very easy to just, crumple into that moment of inadequacy that I can't do it. But I can't do it, and I think that one of my, and this is maybe a slightly controversial opinion about disability, but I think that in a situation like that, if you are a person with disability, it is your responsibility to make, because quite often it's very awkward. If you have an interaction with somebody who is able-bodied and you're asking them to do something for you, for example, I'm in a situation, the very first time this happened to me, it was very soon after I left hospital, and I was in a bar, and the people that I was going to sit with had chosen to sit in a place in the bar up two steps. And that's impossible. I can't do that myself. And so I had to ask for help. And two waiting staff in the bar lifted me up, and then two of the people that I was with lifted me down when we left. Okay. And it was awkward. And on the way home, I was analyzing why it was awkward, and I realized it was my fault. Because when people are interacting with you like that, they don't know what to do. They don't know. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to upset you or offend you. You become an immediate political minefield for people. And so as a person who has a disability, it's your job to make those people comfortable. Okay. And it's easy as well. All you have to do is just take charge. You have to go, okay, guys, if you grab here. If you want two people at the back, and we can go. And, in the moment that you do that, you take control of that situation, all of the awkwardness just goes away. Everybody's happy, fine, great, laughing.
Yeah.
And so I think that being okay with asking for help, but also owning it, not crumpling in that moment of being like, yeah, shit, I need help because I can't do this. But like, shit, I'm little now, I didn't used to be, but let's do this thing. Can you help me? Because the moment that you take charge in that moment, it becomes easier for everybody.
Yeah. And that's kind of like an ethos that's kind of run throughout everything, I think, for you, isn't it? Let me take charge of things I can take charge of, and the power in that, taking control of what you can control. It's
incredibly empowering.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that that really struck me. One of them, I know it's past now, but am I right in thinking you did this is quite hard to say, an eliminate fear seminar recently?
Yeah, I did.
Is that continuing? I know you were talking that potentially it could turn into a weekend or a week, or
it is something that I want to do. I think that. It is something that I really understand. And I think that, there are lots of lessons that I've learned throughout my career, which I think would be useful for people. It's something that I think is is best dealt with in a physical, practical setting.
Yeah.
And so that's absolutely something that I intend to do. It's just about, having the time to organize it. But yeah, I did a virtual version of it, which was great and worked very well. But I think that as we all know, that whole Zoom thing is quite limiting, especially if you're talking about things that are practical. I think giving people the opportunity to try something, is very useful.
Right, brilliant. So watch this space on that one.
Yeah,
potentially.
Absolutely.
Now I know your hypnotherapy is exploding right now. Something I'm really interested in. It's not something that I know tons about. I have been researching it of late, not just because you were coming on, but it's particularly in the work I do, people are asking more and more questions, and I've always had a real open mind about it. And doing quite intensive research on it recently, I mean, the science really backs it up that this stuff works. It really, really works. I know you're quite passionate about dispelling some of the myths about what hypnosis isn't. I didn't know if I could just kind of give you that space to kind of get that point across, because I think it is important that it's not, the guy with the watch getting you to do something silly. It's much, much more than that, isn't it?
Using hypnosis as an entertainment is a bit like owning a McLaren Mercedes and only using it to go to the shops once a month. It does it a massive disservice. Hypnosis is essentially learning. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's so funny that people go, I believe in it, or I have an open mind about it, because we experience hypnosis all the time, every day. Without anybody helping us.
Probably like our phones, like you were just describing.
Yeah, but it's learning, and it's something that we do to ourselves, but it's a learning that happens unconsciously, not consciously, and so because of that, it's not familiar to us, and it's not something that's taught, because when it happens to us without a hypnotist, it is it's usually something that is happening in not a traumatic session, but in a moment of heightened emotion. That's the moment that we're vulnerable to learning. And so, for example, you've got a guy on stage that is being made to think that he's a penguin. This is a familiar thing that we've seen. And you've got a person at home who is an emotional eater, and they're going to the cupboard, they're going to eat a whole packet of biscuits. Now, the guy on stage knows he's not a penguin. He knows that, but he's still acting in those ways. He's being compelled to act in those ways because of what's happening with the hypnosis. The person that's going to the cupboard to eat the biscuits knows they shouldn't eat the biscuits, but they're still doing it. But in this example, there's nobody swinging a watch. This person's done it to themselves, or rather, they haven't done it to themselves. Emotional eating, as an example of unconscious learning, usually happens when you're a kid and you're upset about something. Maybe you slipped and fell and hurt yourself, and a well-meaning parent is going to give you a biscuit. To make you feel better. And in that moment, you're learning to connect your emotional needs to sugary food, right? And so from that point on, you've learned that thing, that your emotional needs can be resolved by eating food. There was no hypnotist. It just happened. We learn in moments of heightened emotion. And so what hypnosis really is it's a back door to that, but it works in the same way. If you have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind is all of your knowledge and memory and skills and everything that's ever happened to you. You don't walk around with that in the forefront of your mind the whole time, but you can get it if you want to. You can think about, what you did yesterday, or, any of the things that you've known. So if you think about all of that knowledge store as a submarine, your conscious mind, in that analogy, would be the periscope. So that's the part that's taking in new information, giving you an awareness of what's going on. But crucially, it it checks any new information against your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So if I point at the wall behind you and tell you that that wall is blue, your conscious mind looks at it and goes, "Oh, that sounds white. I know what white looks like. I've seen it before." But if I give your conscious mind something to do, something to focus on, in that shift, whilst it's busy thinking about, flying with the sun, whatever I'm going to say to you to kind of relax you, in that moment while your conscious mind is busy, if I talk to you, now I'm talking to your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind by function doesn't take in new information. That's not its job. So I can tell your unconscious mind that that wall is blue, and it'll go, okay. And that's it. That's how it works.
Wow.
It is an incredibly effective therapy, with a caveat that some people are better at it than others. It's a skill. Yeah. Some people are better at it than others. Most people at some level can benefit from it. But I would say that I see the majority of the people that come and see me once.
Okay. Wow.
And they will not need to come back again.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. And it is like, it is amazing because we're just not used to learning that way. So for example, there's a lady that I treated, who had chronic vomiting syndrome. She was, and that is what it sounds like. It's not all the time, but when she had an attack, it would be for 8 hours. It's a horrendous situation.
Yeah, that sounds
she
awful.
Lost a job, was essentially housebound, and had been like that way for years.
Wow.
And I saw her once, and that was that.
That's incredible.
Done.
That is incredible.
And that's, it is essentially a method of making a shift to any unwanted feeling or emotion or behavior, and also you can use it. If you just think about the capacity of your unconscious mind and what that's capable of and what you want to do in your life, you can use it for positive things too. Mm-hmm. So you could help people get over inhibitions in, let's say, running their 5K. When they hit that wall, you can eliminate that for them. There's lots of ways that you can use it, because essentially it's like, what do you want to learn? Yeah. It's a teaching method.
Is there anything you think is off limits with hypnosis? For example, you talk about emotional eating. How would you feel if someone, say, with anorexia came to you, or bulimia or something like that? Do you think even on those kind of, on the level of, say, an eating disorder, it could work as well?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, and it's about, because there are lots of different tools that you can use in hypnosis. It's been around for a while, and people have really developed a lot of different techniques. So what I would do for somebody that had emotional eating would be very different from what I would do for somebody that had like a phobia, for example. Yeah. They're very, very different techniques. But the core of it is essentially the same. It's a fascinating thing. One thing that I will say, which you might find really interesting, and I'll send you a link to this article about depression, because they have recently found what they believe to be the root cause of depression, and it is not what a lot of people think. Okay. This came from a sleep study that the guy that was doing it, and I'm going to murder this story a little bit, but I'll do my very best. The guy that was doing it was trying to get to the bottom of the purpose, the function of REM sleep, and they worked out that it is REM is designed to resolve things that you have considered or pondered on. They call it unresolved rumination. Things that you've ruminated on throughout your day and then not resolved.
Okay.
You deal with that. You close those loops in REM sleep.
Okay.
So if you're a person that is constantly spinning on what about this and what about that and is this going to be a problem, if you have that kind of mind that is spinning, then what happens is you have an excess of REM sleep.
Okay.
You have a very limited amount then of restorative sleep, and you wake up knackered. You wake up like you didn't get a good night's sleep, right?
Yeah.
Which then, because you're tired, is likely to result in even more unresolved rumination.
That's really interesting.
And it becomes this downward spiral, right? And so the thing, and you know, it is a thing that we can tackle to a certain extent in hypnosis. But the biggest thing actually to help deal with people that are suffering with depression and engaging in that unresolved rumination is stop it. And I know that sounds glib, but what I mean by that is, I'm not going to say stop your mind spinning, because that's clearly at that point, who you are. But close the loop.
Yeah.
If you're thinking there, well, shit, Ollie said he was going to call me, and he hasn't called me, and maybe that means he doesn't like me anymore, or maybe there's been an accident, or whatever it might be. The answer to it is to find out, to call you, to have a conversation with you, as opposed to just letting it hang. Because if you let it hang, then you're going to deal with it in your sleep, and so that's really the first thing, is to just limit that unresolved rumination, find the answers, close the loop. Now, obviously, there are loops that you can't close. If you're really worried about what the weather's going to be like a week next Sunday, we can't do anything about that. You can't close that loop. So that kind of thinking, we can deal with it in hypnosis.
That's really interesting, because a lot of people are sort of in long-term recovery from alcohol and drugs and things like that. They talk about taking like nightly inventory. So writing things down that they're scared about, that they're angry about, fears, resentments, that kind of thing. And then if it's not resolved by sleep, they will then ring somebody, it could be someone else in recovery or a therapist, to then go through it. It's quite interesting that the science kind of backs up that approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really interesting what happens in REM there. And that makes real sense as well.
It's a downward spiral, but if you can, do that, if you can actively, consciously close the loops, think about something, okay, what's the answer? You can get in the habit of closing those loops, and then what happens is you'll have less REM sleep, more restorative sleep, and then maybe the following day you'll ruminate less, and so you can make that a positive spiral upwards. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think that there's a very real there are two reasons why I think hypnosis is a sort of fringe thing. It is not really engaged by by medicine generally, like conventional medicine, and also I think the public is suspicious of it because of the people with the wax beards, and it feels like giving over a level of control. That's how those people present it. They present it in a way that makes people think that they're vulnerable to being controlled by a person they don't. I mean, the whole thing sounds hideous, really, and yet it's and frankly, most of that entertainment is awful, because what you're doing is you're putting somebody on stage and then just laughing at them, making fun of them. Like it's not great, to be honest. But it has, it's seeped into the public consciousness. That's what this is, and they don't know that it's a panacea that can help them. So there's that problem, and then the other side of it, which these are my suspicions, is that the global market for antidepressants is about $13 billion. It's a lot of money. And if somebody can come and sit with me for 45 minutes and feel better, then what's that going to do to that, that industry? And so I think that there is a level of that. I think that it's being not given a push by sort of conventional medicine because it has the potential to, take away a lot of business.
I think you refer to it a couple of times as moving the furniture around in a couple of your videos, but it seems to, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to have the ability to change some neuroplasticity in the subconscious mind. I've read some stuff around how it can sort of tap around with the amygdala, for example, which is incredible.
It is where phobias are formed.
Yeah.
And that is what we call a one-time learning response.
Yeah.
So somebody has one moment, one engagement with a thing, and then forever afterwards, they're afraid of spiders or whatever it might be. And the good news about that is that phobias are actually incredibly simple to solve.
Right.
Like it is one of the easiest things actually to resolve in hypnotherapy because it was so simply formed. And the unconscious mind is not clever.
It's the most primitive part, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't deal well with complicated ideas. It deals well with, responds well to metaphor and simple instructions. And the good news about changing, the things that are formed by the amygdala, that phobia response, is that it is very simple, and so consequently, it doesn't take a huge amount to redirect it.
Sorry to keep sort of going back to
that's all right. It's
the topic of addiction, but it's exactly how I kind of approach it. I often say to clients, I see it's a learning disorder, actually, addiction, because a lot of these people that I'm working with for many years, they're saying, a drink helps me when I'm bored, or a line of Coke helps me get a job done. You're constantly reaffirming that learning that alcohol and drugs, I need it to survive. And so a learning disorder is kind of taken over and hijacked, and you can unlearn that stuff.
It's a habitual thing, and you got to look at why did it start. What was the thing that you were feeling that made you do that thing at the very beginning, and then quite often, because a lot of the time people do these things for a very long time.
Yeah.
Where they are now, that reason doesn't exist anymore. And so they've created this little island of habit. And so I think that, we can talk to, somebody's unconscious mind and talk to the part that's running that habit and ask it to do something else. You can really redirect it that simply. And then at the same time, I think that you have to, the intention, hypnosis it's not a thing that I do to you, right? It is a thing that you do to you, and I'm just showing you how. That's it, right?
Wow.
But it's your thing. It's not a passive experience. And so because of that, you're imagining the things, you're going to the places and a lot of the work that I do is quite visually, it engages your visual imagination very, very much. That's where we go. And whilst we're doing those things, we're layering it with unconscious suggestions. So all of that is something that you're doing, but it doesn't need to stop there. If you're in a situation where you're going to go and have, when you're in this place, you're going to have a line of Coke, or, when you're with these people, that's what you do. Well, don't do that either. You can be in control of your environment, the people that you hang out with, the things that you do, and it is you're the one that wants to stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's stop all of those avenues and make it easier on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why put yourself in a situation where you're going to make it, harder, and also put the onus on the people that are around you to not do that? Let's change.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I'm just so passionate about, no matter what kind of mental health struggle you're going through or physical health struggle you're going through, that everyone's got access to all of these things. I'm so open-minded about all of it. And like I say, the science that I've read around hypnotherapy is just brilliant. So, I really applaud you doing it. And trying to eliminate fear in people's lives, and and everything else that you're doing. If you're not following Jonathan online, go and do that now. You're definitely going to have a better day for it. Some really great, positive, inspiring content. And
thank you.
And yeah, if you're struggling with anything and you're open to hypnotherapy, I'll put links in the show notes as well about how to contact you there. I think we're nearly out of time, Jonathan.
Yeah, no worries at all. This has been a great chat. I've really enjoyed it.
I've loved every second of it. It's absolutely flown. And I just want to thank you again for coming down. And
a pleasure. And I'm so glad. Let's not leave it so long next time.
Absolutely. And it's so inspiring to have Jonathan here and, go through all the details of, what happened and what life is like now. It's just so inspiring. And if I can just have 10%, I think, of the gratitude that you've got, I think I'm going to have a great life. So I just, it's really inspiring. And
well, thank you. Appreciate it.
And to everyone watching and listening, as I always promise, there will be another show in 2 weeks' time. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, share, like. Oh, and leave a review. Apparently that helps the algorithm. Do that as well. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. And thanks, Jonathan.